As I was going through my notes in the opening, I never introduced myself, so if people are seeing a strange face on the screen, a lot of you know me. But anyway, I'm Dick Morningstar. I'm the founding chairman of the Global Energy Center. And once upon a time in ancient history, I was ambassador to the European Union, among other things. Okay, thank you, Minister. And we'll go to our next speaker, and that is Minister Davor Filipović. I think I have that pronounced right.
Yes, you did.
Who's the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development for the Republic of Croatia. And more, as you know, I meet people who are various ministers around the world. Those titles often do get combined now: economy, energy, sustainable development, and so forth. So we look forward to hearing your remarks, your keynote remarks, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Morningstar. Hello, everyone. Hello, my dear colleague Peter. And please let me begin by thanking the Atlantic Council for inviting me here and speak at the annual Central and Eastern European Energy Security Conference. My ministry had the pleasure of working together with Atlantic Council on the PTEC ministerial meeting in March this year in Zagreb. I'm happy to be here with you because I know I'm among allies. Yes, among allies. In today's hyper-changing and unstable world in which we live in, allies are very important. We are allies in terms of civilization we belong to, in terms of values we live and defend. Yes, values, a concept that is rarely mentioned, but it is important and perhaps crucial. Values are important. They make the difference between peace and war, law and lawlessness, justice and injustice, good and evil. Russian aggression on Ukraine marked the end of an era. War has returned to European continent, and liberty, which European generations have taken for granted, must be defended again. Croatia has been with Ukrainian people from the day one. This is our duty as European, democratic, peace-respecting country, but more importantly, it is our duty as a country and as a people who have suffered aggression from a larger predator enemy. The government in which I have the honor to serve as a minister has been unreservedly with the Ukrainian people since the day one. Croatia, like Ukraine, fought for its freedom. Croatia, like Ukraine, was exposed to brutal propaganda before the aggression, confusing many about what is right and what is wrong, who is the victim and who is the criminal. Croatia, too, was once being denied statehood, language, the right to freedom and its own path. We took our fate in our hands. We fought for our freedom, and just like Ukrainian people are fighting for theirs now. And we won, and Ukraine will also win. 3 decades after the war, my country is a member of NATO, the European Union. We entered Schengen zone. We introduced euro as a currency in our country. That's an elite club of just 15 countries in the world. We have shown the world that even though we are a small country in terms of area and population, we are ready for great deeds. That's why today we know very well that Ukrainian people are going through what the Ukrainian people are going through and how humanly and security-wise it is important to help them. Croatia is sincere on Ukraine's European path. On this path, we will continue to help the Ukrainian people. We will continue to help financially, logistically, legally, and most important, we will provide our know-how in various key areas. We have the experience with reconstruction of a country destroyed by a war. Namely, we had to rebuild our country after the war. My homeland had suffered damage in the amount of more than $250 billion. Our companies, Croatian companies, are ready to participate in the renewal of the electric power network, from designing to the delivery of equipment such as substations, power plants and transmission lines. We also have companies which are experienced in the renovation of power plant facilities, whether it is a hydroelectric power plants, thermal power plants, or nuclear power plants. These companies were present on the Ukrainian market even before the Russian aggression on Ukraine. I believe that in your countries, as well as in mine, there are voices saying that the war in Ukraine and European energy are somewhat different topics, that this is all a misunderstanding or warmongering. And this is becoming a pattern across Europe. Voices like this were undermining Croatia's energy security up until a few years ago. Sadly, Ukraine and energy are the same topic. The topic of independence, the topic of security, and the topic of our future. The topic of resisting encirclement, the topic of standing up for what is right in the face of authoritarianism and despotism. No European country can allow itself to fall under the energy blackmail by hybrid actors from East ever again. History teaches us that subjunction in one domain never ends there. It always continues into other domains until it disintegrates the very fabric of the free nation. Therefore, if we are able to be safe, secure, and independent tomorrow, we must act today. My government persisted in the Croatian strategic project of LNG terminal on the island of Krk, and thus the Croatia became an indispensable element of European energy security. We, as a government, suffered various attacks, some from the misled, some from the bribed actors. We endured. Today, it is obvious to everyone how long-term we were in our reasoning and how right we were in insisting on this energy supply diversification project. We are perfectly aware that energy independence and energy security is one of the main pillars of national security. As a responsible Euro-Atlantic partner, we are now interested not only in fulfilling our national energy needs. We understand the common challenges we all face, and Croatia is resolved to contribute to both regional and European security of supply by becoming an energy hub. Thus, we've decided to increase the capacities of our LNG terminal, to double the capacities in order to, and also to invest in the proper land pipeline infrastructure. The plan is also to make it suitable for the transport of renewable sources of energy such as hydrogen. In addition, it is necessary to work on new transport corridors, such as Ionian-Adriatic one, which would connect Greece by the shortest route via the highway via Albania, Montenegro, and Croatia with Italy. By opening the corridor for the road traffic, other infrastructure could be built in parallel, natural gas and later hydrogen, and as well as railways. Hence, we became better connected with our neighbors, and the diversification of supply sources increases for all our neighboring countries, and not only the EU member states. One such well-incorporated project is a southern gas pipeline connection between Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is also a strategic project for Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We play an active role in an active European stabilizing role in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Southeast Europe, since we know that if responsible actors do not step up, the region is likely a prey for an irresponsible state, para-state, or non-state actors, especially in this turbulent era we live in. Croatia leads by an example. Croatia leads by the results, and we ask of others nothing what we are not willing to demonstrate as a country and as a nation. Once again, I'm happy to be here with you, with our allies. We may face many more challenges in the future, but none of us will be facing them alone. Our unity, our determination, our values, that is definitely our strength. Let us discuss and deepen our areas of cooperation to the benefit of our countries and the whole Euro-Atlantic community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Filipović. Those were great remarks, and Croatia is playing such a key role in the region. Congratulations on the completion of the Kirk terminal, which was a long time coming. But the commitment to double the capacity will have huge benefits to the entire region. Our next speaker will be virtual. Is he here? Yeah.
But yeah, if you wouldn't mind beginning the fireside chat and then coming back to the minister, we'll say to you when he's joined.
Whatever you say. Okay, we're waiting for Minister Galushchenko to come on virtually, and we are actually, it never happens, we're actually ahead of schedule. That may be why he hasn't come yet. But so let's start as suggested, let's start our fireside chat, Minister Dovhun. I thought that your description of the trilemma was really appropriate. And one of the things that we've certainly talked about here is the importance of the energy transition itself to energy security. I mean, it sort of goes without saying that the greater the use of new technologies, the less dependence on a supplier like Russia, and that both gas and new technologies and nuclear, as we've talked about, are going to be important to that trilemma. Do you want to expand a little bit on that? That we're not talking about an either-or proposition between gas, for example, and gas or nuclear, and the energy transition.
Yeah. One of the aspects that I didn't share because I really wanted to keep the time of the keynote short and contribute to be ahead of the schedule is really the question: if we're talking about the CO2 emissions or the greenhouse emissions, what is the origin? And we need to actually be very clear and understand the nature of all 5 areas. I mean, there are many more, but 5 main contributors: the industrial production, the agriculture, transportation, heating and cooling, and I forgot the 5th one, but I'll remember. Every single area needs an individual approach in dealing with the decarbonization. And coming back to the question about the gas, about the current energy sources that we have here, we need to appreciate that almost 80% of the energy sources or the fuel comes from the fossil today. So any energy transition needs to be really bias-free and respect the physics and the timeline of decarbonization. Of course, there are the quick wins, and I can share with you the example of a project that we've been working on in the eastern part of Slovakia, where our steel producer is working on a project of decarbonizing their production to replace the blast furnaces to the electric arc ones, contributing just by 2 out of 3, they would contribute to 50% reduction of the emissions in course of the 3-4 years. There are other industries and areas where we need to do the exercise and calculation. The chart is not here anymore, about the sustainability, about the security of supply and affordability. That would show that in course of the next 10-20 years, we would still need to use the natural gas as the primary source of the energy. I don't think it's bad. We just need to compare it with the other measures and gradually, and with the urgency of the climate crisis, probably to speed up some of the quick wins implementations. It's very complex talk. I could be agitated and spend hours talking about the details from here to there, impact to the grids. Talking about the nuclear, for example, there's a lot of emotions and sentiment in the discussion. At the end of the day, if you really are looking at the 3 dimensions, the trilemma, and try to use the values in the chart, we get the answer. And I believe that without a bias, using the facts, we would come to an agreement that a combination of the new renewables with a stable nuclear power that would provide the electricity to the new applications, replacing the fossil fuel on a 24/7 basis, is probably one of the, not only the cleanest way of the energy transition, but also contributing to the affordability. But that's something that is probably for another meeting, right?
Well, that's great. A great answer. You know, I was thinking when we were talking about fossil fuels, if my memory is correct, Slovakia does have an exemption with respect to the oil embargo with Russia, and which I take it relates to the fact that that's really the only way you can get oil shipped in, at least for now. Could you just briefly explain that and what you're doing to ultimately rid yourself of Russian oil?
Yeah. Let me start with the explanation and sharing the background, and then I'll respond to your question. When we talk about the oil, it's the oil that actually Slovakia has been importing for decades through the pipeline of friendship, Družba.
Družba, yeah.
And at the end of the pipeline, we have a facility, the refinery in Bratislava, on the outskirts of our capital, that produces and provides the fuel to our cars for the transportation, but also produces different other products as a side products of the oil processing. And we need to be really clear here: the plastics does not appear from the air or from the sun; it's from the oil.
Right.
So, with the wake-up call of the last year and with the sanctions in a play, we were very glad that we found a support of the European Union to understand the complexity, and that shift from one supplier source to another is not just a matter of reversing the flow of the oil, but changing the technology that has been built for decades in the factory. So the answer to your question, it's not only like be applied in the gas industry to find the different sources of the gas, having the contracts with the LNG terminals and the pipes, but it's investment into the transition of the technology at the refinery. So that's basically something that the refinery and the supply chain has been working intensively to be prepared for the diversification and change of the source of the origin. Honestly, if we switched off the pipeline and stopped using that, it would have a tremendous impact, not only to Slovakia, but also to the pricing of oil and the related products in the Central and Eastern Europe, probably the EU itself. So that's the reason why we gradually working on a change, but didn't do it, or were not able to execute it in matters of weeks or months.
How long do you think it'll take?
It's a good question. There is a range between, and don't quote me right now, it's another Chatham rule. But we talking.
Except this is public.
Yeah, I know. It's between. It's not going to be shorter than 1 year. So let them.
Okay. You know, Europe has done very well this winter for a lot of reasons, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. Good weather, you know, low demand in China for gas. Reduction of demand, increased renewables, and the like. But there's still a lot of people who are worried about next winter. How do you see the prospects for next winter for Slovakia and for Europe as a whole?
There are things that you can control, and there are things you can't control. And you know, we should be thankful for the things that we could not control last winter. The weather was really favorable. So one of the reasons why we didn't have the issues and the crisis that we forecasted in the worst case scenarios, it's thanks to that. Then you have the things that you can control, and it's the diversification of the supply, and that's what our gas company and the supply chain has been working on intensively within last 14 months. It's great to say that 14 months ago, Slovakia was 100% dependent on the Russian source of the natural gas. Today, it's 30%, so 70+% can be sourced today, but also in the winter from the sources outside of the Russian influence. The second area which we can control is the level of the storage, or stored gas for the winter season. And I'm really happy to receive the brief before this discussion from our gas company stating that we're quite safe for the upcoming winter season in terms of when it comes to the stored gas today, but also for the rest of the 24. I shared that yesterday on our dinner meeting. That should not be the reason for us to stop working and progressing. It's like with the boat on a sea, we have a calm water right now, but it might be misled by staying in the middle of the storm eye rather than being out of the storm. So there's a lot of work to continue.
Well, yeah, let me ask you, on the 30% that you get from Russia, is that still through Ukraine? Excuse me, still through Ukrainian transit?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and what's somewhat remarkable is that transit is continuing to go through Ukraine, at least to an extent, and the transit fees, as I understand it, are actually getting paid. At least that's been my understanding. I believe that's right, which just seems sort of weird given the overall situation of the war. But which leads to the question, if Russia were to shut off transit through Ukraine and you lost that 30%, what would happen next winter?
When I answered your previous question, it was, and the question was, are we ready for the next winter?
Right.
It's a combination of the sources of the gas and the level of the storages that we have. So in short, we should not have a serious issue the next winter, but that's the simplification of the things. Probably understand.
Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit about nuclear and where you see the role of nuclear for Slovakia. Also, it's obviously very important in the whole Central and Eastern European region. It's a matter of debate among countries, member states, and even within the Commission. There's debate as to the importance of nuclear and financing of nuclear. How do you see the situation, and how do you think all this will be resolved?
So let me focus on Slovakia first, and then comment on the rest of the Europe. And we have Mr. Galushchenko online with us.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Should we keep going?
Just
tell us when to interrupt.
Say hello to our friend and answer the question I received. Slovakia has been #2 country when it comes to the percentage of the nuclear in the energy mix or the electricity production mix. With the Unit 3 in our power plant Mochovce, which is now on 50% and is going to grow in the course of the next months, and with the Unit 4, which is due in 18 to 24 months, we would actually get about 80%, close to 90%, which would make Slovakia the top 1 country in the world when it comes to the share of nuclear in the power mix. But that's not only the generation, it's also about the supply chain, it's about the talent, it's about the people who are working at the nuclear power station, but also in the suppliers' ecosystem. And that's something, coming to the second part of your question, we would like, and we are ready to share with our peers in the Central and Eastern Europe, but also in the rest of the Europe, which either considers to introduce the nuclear power into their energy mix or to ramp up and increase the share of the nuclear. Of course, it's a sensitive question. I believe that the only reasonable way going forward is to get rid of the emotions, look at the data, and make the decision at the end.
We should keep going for 2 more minutes? Okay. Okay, well, that answers that question. I was hoping to go to Minister Galushchenko now because when we resume our fireside chat, I'd like to get your reaction to what he said and your views on how to best help Ukraine. We're still not quite ready. Well, why don't you start, and then let us know when we can tune into Minister Galushchenko, and then we'll just stop and come back, and you can respond to what he said.
I just realized that I can see Herman on the screen and you can't, so that's why I was waving.
He's right there. We're almost. Technically, it's almost ready. Okay.
Look,
Now? No? Okay, go ahead.
The topic of Ukraine, the war, the terrible things that are happening there are very emotional for me, and for two reasons. I've been part of the transmission system operator who was in a daily contact with the Ukrenergo right after the invasion, or actually before, because we planned the isolated island exercise that was actually supposed to be 4 days, was extended to the end of March, and ended up by synchronization of Ukrenergo and Ukrainian system to Europe. That's one reason. The second one is that my family comes from the eastern Slovakia, and part of the family lives at the border. And
yeah, people don't realize there is a common border with Slovakia.
And not many people know, but my father told me that part of the family lives in Ukraine because of the split of the region after the Second War. So again, family and personal. And I don't want to add the things that we shared, how much we support Ukraine and Ukrenergo and as the country, as the people, because I would just repeat it. And okay, I think it's very important, and I'm happy that we are part of the Hellbent system.
Okay, let's go to the minister and then get your response when he's finished. So now it's my pleasure to introduce virtually the Ukraine's Minister of Energy, Herman Galushchenko, and we're anxious to hear your assessment of the situation in Ukraine and what needs to be done to help immediately and perhaps in the more midterm, and also to convey our best wishes to all of the Ukrainian people as they carry on this courageous fight for their independence. So, Mr. Minister, you're on. I don't know if he heard me. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to speak today, and I think that the topic is really very important, especially in our situation, especially when Ukraine is at war, and now we are fighting not only for our independence, not only for our freedom. So we are fighting for the freedom and the values of European countries and European democracies. In fact, I think that everyone can agree that if you fail to respond to aggression, you will have to fight it later and on more larger scale. That was really about the European leaders in 1930s, and it's also happened in this century. And that's really the big war. The first big war started not with the invasion in Poland, and in fact, the current big war really didn't start with the invasion to Ukraine. In fact, both wars started earlier when European politicians decided that it was better to negotiate with the aggressive regime than to resist these regimes. And but it happened as a result of trying to find the compromise with the aggressor. And of course, it looks like there is an attempt to find a comfort and peace for one part of Europe just because there is a war in the other part of the continent. And of course, a lot of countries could understand what I am talking about. First of all, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. In fact, Putin showed his intention clear when he assaulted Georgia. It was the first test for the limits of international law. And how did the collective West respond to this violation? The West allowed and welcomed the construction of the Nord Stream pipelines. And Russia received even more leverages in continental energy policy. Profits from selling these fossil fuels really allowed Russia to build this military machine, which is now killing Ukrainians. And in fact, the same happened with Ukraine in 2014, Crimea, occupation of Crimea and Donbass. And we understand that it was another scenario for Russians to test the lines of international law. And nothing happened. So, I mean, and after this, the Gazprom almost finished the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And we really, when we trying to send our messages and to communicate our messages to Europeans that, look, that is not about the economy, that is not about commerce, that is the issue of influence, and that is the issue of possibility to manipulate prices, that is the issue of dependence for European countries. Unfortunately, nobody hears us at that stage, and we're really trying to say that that is not a commodity, that is a weapon for Russians, which would allow them to earn more money for big war. And that is really what has happened. That is what has happened. And all our voices was heard, I think, in 24 of February last year, when the full-scale invasion started. Of course, today is 477 days of this war. Millions of Ukrainians suffer. Millions of Ukrainians leave the country. A lot of people lost their homes, and that is, of course, the issue of really, I must say, the genocide of Ukrainians from Russia. Look what they are doing. I mean, so they're shelling intentionally, directly, the houses. They are shelling people and civilian people. The attacks on the energy infrastructure, which they started from the 10th of October last year, and it was everyday attack on the energy. Of course, it's something far from war, that is far from battlefield. So, and they officially mentioned that we want Ukraine to suffer. We want them to suffer. So they are. This war is really going not only on the battlefield. So that is a war against the people of Ukraine. So that is the war with civilians. I don't want to make the legal notions of this, because everyone understands that it is exactly the crimes which is provided in the international law conventions. But today it's also what is very important, that what lessons we had from this situation, what lessons we had from this war. And I must say that, of course, the Europe also see already what happened with this trade with Russia. What does it mean, the export of Russian fossil fuels, how it's influenced the possibility of Russia to manipulate the prices, to manipulate the governments, and to manipulate the people in Europe. And that is really the consequences of all this policy which was before, and trying to negotiate with aggressor. The good thing is that Europe also already, I might say, have this solidarity against Russia. And that is very important, because we already have the packages of sanctions. And of course, we want to make them more tough. We want them to make more efficient, not to allow Russians to find any way to escape the sanctions. But the solidarity is also one of the goals for Russians. So now they want to split Europeans, and it looks like that is part of the next steps which they want to do. They already tried to do it several ways. I think they would continue to fight against the European solidarity, because this solidarity is a real threat to them, because this solidarity allowed to get rid of Russian coal, to get rid of Russian gas and oil from European markets, and that is very important. So we have the terms when the Europe supposed to stop any cooperation, for instance, in gas with Russia. So we understand that today everyone already have the feeling that any kind of cooperation with Russia, especially when we are talking about the fossil fuels, is really dangerous when they have the monopoly, they have the chance to influence the decisions inside the European countries. That is what happened with the storages, gas storages in Europe, which mostly all of them were owned by Gazprom. And in fact, if you want to store gas in your country, but the storage is not belongs to you, that is the issue, how you could answer the issue of national security. And a lot of decisions was made. And I really very glad that this European solidarity is stable. And in my communication with my colleagues, ministers in the EU and other countries, so we understand that we need, and there is a general understanding that we need to continue. We need to be sure that this solidarity would be last forever, because otherwise the Russians would split us, and we would have another very challenging things in especially in the energy market. The one thing which is also very important, and that is still the issue of discussion, that is the sanctions in nuclear. And of course, the nuclear is one of the intellectual part of export from Russia, and we understand there are a lot of dependence on Russian cooperation with Russia in nuclear, especially when we are talking about the nuclear fuel. But that is another very important step, because after what they did with the nuclear safety and security in the global aspect, that is not only about the Ukraine and Russia, that is not only about the capture of first day of full-scale invasion, Chernobyl NPP, then the capture from the 3rd to 4th of March, the Zaporizhia NPP. That is not only about this. That is not only about what they are doing on these nuclear power plants. That is not only about the many times blackouts of the nuclear power plants. And for instance, the Zaporizhia NPP was already 7 times in blackout. So, and each blackout, that is one step before the Fukushima scenario. That is the country which also operate the nuclear fleet, the country which in fact, in the top countries of the market in nuclear technology, it cannot be there. It cannot be on the civilized market when they, from one hand, they're trying to sell technologies, they're trying to be the reliable partner in nuclear industry, and from the other hand, it's destroy everything what the world achieved in nuclear safety and security. And that is not our only Ukrainian opinion. So that is also confirmed by EIA, for instance. So after the visit of EIA delegation, the first visit to Zaporizhia NPP, they mentioned and make a report that all 7 pillars of nuclear safety and security destroyed, that totally destroyed. And that is another challenging issue. That's why this sanction in the field of nuclear is very important, and we have to do this. We have to find the ways. We have to send signal right now to the civilized world that the Russian cannot be on this market, on the civilized market in nuclear technology in the future. Another issue which is also very important, and that is also comes from our, let's say, I might say, constant communication with our partners and with many international organizations in the energy sector, that very important not to allow the Russians to come back. That is something which is still in the heads of some people, that the war would be over in some times, and then we would come back to Russia, and then we would renegotiate some kind of agreements in the energy sector. That is very dangerous point. So we should take this as a position of the civilized world. Russia would never come back in the energy market, never ever. Otherwise, it means that we create this situation when they would trying to restart the influence inside the country. They were trying to have another tools to do this. That is very, very important issue. And of course, the obvious solution for, and I must say the solution and conclusion from what is now happening with the war in Ukraine is that that is dependence on any type of fossil fuels. And the answer to this dependence, of course, that is the green transition. And the green transition and transition of the energy sector, really very important goal to be achieved by all countries, to be sure. Because today we understand that, for instance, the green transition and renewables, that is not only about ecology, that is not only about the sun and solar, that is about the national security. As much as you can rely on renewables, which produce electricity in your country, which generate electricity decentralized around the country, and that is also one of the lessons which Ukraine took from the previous winter, where we had to maintain our system during everyday massive attacks, or not massive attacks, but everyday attacks on the energy infrastructure. That it's very important to have the decentralized generation, because, for instance, we had some days when they broke the lines and destroyed the lines of transmission of electricity. And for instance, when we had nuclear fleet in one part of the country, we can produce electricity, but there is no consumption level on the west of Ukraine, for instance, and we have to restrict production. Otherwise, we have a deficit in the other part of the country, but we cannot transmit from one region to another. And it makes the cut of supply for our households in one part of the country, and from the other side, we restrict production in the other. So decentralization is really a key point for our strategy, because we rethink a lot of in the energy of Ukraine after these attacks. Of course, we got some unique experience how to maintain the system during the attacks, how to how to change, how to quickly repair, what to do, some technical unique decisions. But I really frankly very hope that nobody would need our advice in the future in the situation like this, when there is direct missiles, drones, and artillery attacks to the energy infrastructure from morning to night, 24 hours a day, and from 10th of October to the 9th of March. And I must say that is really very important to feel safe, because the supply of electricity is the issue of national security. And unfortunately, Ukrainians this winter already felt what is this to live without the electricity, especially in the winter, and that is also connected with the supply of heating with water. And I must say that that is something which really people suffer from, but we become stronger from this. We finished this winter. We more united, because we are ready to do everything to win this war, because we call that is the energy front, that is our line of battle. And we win this winter. We won this winter, and of course, we're sure that we have to do this in the future, because we would win this war in all spheres. And of course, first, that is our army, which is now fighting to get rid of Russia from Ukrainian lands. And very important also what lessons we got from this war. That is what does the word friendship means. I mean, a lot of conference, a lot of communication was before with my colleagues, and so we discussed a lot of issue and green transition, net zero world. I mean, how we need to move, how we need to change the energy sphere in the future. But now we really understand what does this real friendship mean. So it means that we have your support. And I must say that with your support, we also win this winter, not alone. So we have you near us. We have the supply of equipment in kind. We have the supply of donations to the energy support fund of Ukraine. And in fact, that is what really helped us to withstand this winter. And I'm really grateful to the civilized world, which is near Ukraine. And we know that now we are working for preparation for the next winter, and we are working together. We're working together. We only increase the level of cooperation to be ready for the next heating season. And I must say that thank you for support which you provided to us. And really, I know that you believe in us, and we feel your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I understand that you actually cannot hear us where you are, but we greatly appreciate all of your comments. And I think the minister made several important points that, you know, this is not a war just for Ukrainian independence, but for democracy in Europe. That solidarity, he kept emphasizing, is so important. Another point, and be interested in your comments on this, what does it mean to say never go back to Russia? And does that mean just no longer being dependent on Russia, or not getting any fossil fuels from Russia? And then his nuclear point. We talked a lot about this last night. One of your colleagues from Slovakia made a very important case that sanctions on nuclear materials, fuel and other materials, would be very counterproductive, but the minister made a very strong plea, basically. So what we have about 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. What's your reaction to all of this?
Being a member of the Take Care government, the technocrat, means that I'm not binded by the political party, and I can speak up my mind if the facts check. And or to truly answer the question, I'm not a politician, so I probably I'm not the right person to ask the question. Never Russia, or what would be the long term. Personally, what I can say is really that's what I told you before Herman made his speech. I'm really, really sorry for what happened, and I'm really sad because I've been growing up in the Central Eastern Europe, and what Russia does, it's something which is beyond the limits, and so that's my personal view. In terms of the fuel, be it nuclear or the gas, as I shared in the very beginning, you know, the trilemma. That's how we actually look at the answer. What we need to do, what are the measures to keep the balance, to keep the flow of the energy, not only to our industry and households, but also for the system in Europe, etc. However, if I can end this fire chat by one statement, because we had a discussion at the breakfast about the cooperation and the support of the Ukraine. And it might be perceived as, you know, the Ukraine needs help today and will need after the war. What I'm really happy to see, and you probably share the same opinion at the military side, that one of the best prepared and experienced army today in Europe is Ukraine, based on experience. And I can actually say the same for the people working on the grid level, especially the electricity one. We had the discussions with our colleagues in our company, SEPS, whenever they were, you know, unsatisfied or arguing about the small details about the canteen or the benefits. I just asked them, guys, would you like to change the roles and go for 1 week to the substation or to the control room of Ukrenergo, just to value what we have? So we've been helping, as Davor mentioned. We are part of the group of the friends who are providing support, and we're ready to do it by the end of the war and beyond that, after the war is over.
Thank you. We Amos has not gotten here yet. So I'm being instructed by our events people that we can go on for a little bit. You could sing a song. Now, Ben Schmidt sang a song last night, so maybe we need him to do so. But there is one.
But you help me.
There is one area, though, that we didn't talk about that is worth some brief discussion, and that's the need for transatlantic cooperation. Mm-hmm. And how do you see cooperation with the United States and the need for the U.S. to work with the EU, the Commission, and with member states, including directly with Slovakia?
I'm economist by degree, and the discussions we had at the university and after, when we been having the meetings, alumni meetings with the professors, was, are you in favor of the multilateral cooperation and a partnership, or the one country and the country's interests and so on? I'm more on the liberal side. And the history showed, from the Marshall Plan to the globalization to the help, even the last 1 year, that the cooperation and the partnership is very important for the countries involved, for the stability and security of the regions and the global security, but also to the benefit of the people, the households and the students and the young ones. So if you ask me whether it makes sense, I would honestly say yes. If you ask me what areas, that's where the Atlantic Council is also helping, from the energy, through the policies, through the cooperations and education. I think we have a lot of things that we can build on, and a lot of initiatives and challenges that we can tackle together. And together, we could accomplish much more and in a shorter time than every single country or the region individually.
Well, that's great. And thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you for your flexibility with respect to the fireside chat and starting then going to the minister in Ukraine, coming back. And it was just terrific. And thank you again to the Slovak Republic for partnering on this conference. And we are going to go directly now to Olga, who is going to do a fireside chat with my old friend Amos Hochstein.
Rachel, thank you.
Yeah.